All right. Hello, world. My name is Pablo Leroy, aka Pablo, aka Leroy Draconis III, and I am director of Bangkok Lyrical Lunacy. We're an organization that exists to proliferate the art of spoken word poetry in the city of Bangkok. And the way we do that is basically by organizing a monthly open mic and a monthly poetry slam by the name of Bangkok Poetry Slam. So today, what we want to help highlight here for Southeast Asian Poetry Month is we want to look at some of the spoken word poets of Thailand, some Thai spoken word poets, and kind of maybe dig into their perspective. We're going to review some recordings of their work that they have previously performed at Lyrical Lunacy events. It might be an open mic, it might be a poetry slam, what have you, or a showcase. So we're going to just see a poem or two from each of these poets, and then we're going to kind of pick their brain to analyze and see if there's any similarities, any similar influences, and again, just kind of take in what they're like, what inspires them, and what motivates them to put pen to paper. Poets we're going to analyze are Alp and Gabriela Moriarty. All right, and Alp, if you care to go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ob. I do spoken word poetry from Bangkok, and I mostly do spoken poetry about political things. And yep, that's me.
Hello, my name is Gabriela Moriarty, and I am a spoken word poet from Bangkok.
They've both written and performed extensively throughout the city, and they each have a bit of a unique style and point of view. So I'm excited to be able to kind of just watch their work and help us analyze it. So we'll start off with, I've dug really deep for this first video. This is an old recording from maybe 2015, 2016, recorded at Overground Bar and Cafe. And I really like this poem because it for me, it kind of encapsulates the vibe that Alt brings to the open mics and kind of the content that he typically shares. So let's dig into this. I'm going to share my screen now.
Freedom of speech. There is a saying which goes, you cannot put a price on life, but you also cannot put a price on free speech. Because sometimes the consequences of free speech far outweighs its benefits. Because sometimes your freedom of speech is threatened. They want to take your liberty away from you. Anyone who dares to break the silence, anyone who dares to go against the prevailing attitude must be stopped in the name of peace and order. If you must stop someone in the name of peace and order, then you must reconsider why that peace and order is so fragile. Why is it that you must protect it? Is it because a certain upset might lead to a revolution and chaos? If that is so, then the values you are trying to protect are weak. For it can be broken by mere words that you have to stop people from speaking. But I will not be stopped. I absolutely refuse to be the victim of intellectual censorship. I am ready to go to jail. I am ready to suffer the consequences. I am ready to die. But I will not be stopped. I absolutely refuse to be the victim of intellectual censorship. I am ready to go to jail. I am ready to suffer the consequences. I am ready to die. So if you are out there and you wish to oppress me, take me, for I am ready.
Another thing I love about Alt is his poems are very succinct and concise and straight to the point. So I'm gonna go ahead and spin up another one really quick.
Our life on this green earth is but a test. The hen sits on its eggs in its nest. A breeze over the summer landscape blew. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. On his bed, an abandoned child rests, looking forward to the opening of school. Our life on this green earth is but a test. Happy with its find, the ape beats its chest. The fledgling flaps its wings. One by one it flew. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. War generals marvel at their new conquest. How many lives were shattered they never knew. Our life on this green earth is but a test. Mankind must love at our worst and at our best. Compassion and love will hold us like glue. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Our life on this green earth is but a test. Thank you. That was humanity.
So, do you care to comment on any of this before I ask any questions?
Yeah, so I started writing around the time of 2015. So the military coup in Thailand happened in 2014. As I was watching it progress, there was like people were disappearing, like activists were disappearing left and right, and so I needed to find a way to like speak out more about like on certain topics and certain subjects that felt taboo at the time. And so I thought the best way to do that was through poetry, because you sort of can't censor poetry in the same way that you can censor, say, a prose or an essay. Poetry is open to many interpretations.
And so when you first started writing, is there anyone, any specific poets or anyone's work, maybe not necessarily a poet, that might have influenced your writing, the way you saw things, the way you saw how they ought to be? What are like your influences when it comes to your writing, knowing that, okay, the military, it's a response to the military coup that's like, I mean, it's been on, right, since then. What are you looking to kind of inspire your style and your point of view?
I like sonnets the most, like, because the style of the sonnets is that there are like 8 lines, the 4 quartets, there's the volta, which then completely changes the mood of the poem, and then there's the last sextet, where the volta comes in and it changes the mood of the poem, which is where I was very inspired to take up writing, which is from when I read Desert Bois by Oscar Wilde.
Is there a point of view that would kind of represent the amalgam of your work, sort of a central line that connects them all?
Like, I want to show like that we could all live together in this one earth, like that you don't need to like hate each other, but you also like need some sort of central power or central democracy to be able to live peacefully with one another, and not just one tyrannical ruler who overshadows us all. And so the humanity in showing that shows through my work, I think, the most of all.
Well, thank you so much, Op. I'm very grateful for you to just give us insight into your work, and of course, as we saw this from the first video clip, a major just member of this poetic community here in Bangkok, and I really appreciate your presence and your voice. So now we're gonna move on to Gabriella Moriarty. One of my favorite poems of Gabby's, and this one is called Take Your Time.
Take your time before last call. Take your time. It's also nice here on this earth. Forget the sky. Your shine and your shadow comes from the same light. Love, your smile. It makes all the days left in this body a little more bright. So please, take your time. Take your time. There's still luster in those bedroom eyes. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. We can still flirt all the way until it's the end of our sign. Love, sweet dove, together. We have chosen each other in sickness and in health, in sorrows, and through so many joyous nights. Remember all the ways that we held each other, palm to palm, clenching hands tight. Please, please, take your time. Take your time. We've shared so many moments through all of these years, through the levels of the heavens and the layers of hell. In unknown places, we'll meet again with unknown faces, just like we did in all of our previous lives. Please, just take your time. I just can't take this kind of goodbye. Please, just take your time. A quiet little prayer for a small miracle, please. Please. Maybe, perhaps you can. Perhaps you can take some of mine, even for just a little while. Take your time. It's all so nice here on this earth. Forget the sky. Your shine and your shadows come from the same light. Love your smile. It makes all the days left in this body a little more bright. So take your time. Take your time. Oh, I just can't take this kind of goodbye. Oh, please just take some of mine. Take some of mine.
Okay, Gabby, Gabriela Moriarty in the building. Would you care to comment on this piece here?
Yeah, wow. It's like the first time I'm actually seeing a replay of this poem from that night, and I'm like choking up a little bit. It's so there's so much recall in my body of that performance. I actually wrote this piece after witnessing my aunt going through the loss of her husband, my uncle, who had brain cancer and passed away very short after the diagnosis. And in watching her panic in that last month, knowing he is not going to be here on this earth very long, I felt like I can see, you know, when you have 40 to 50 years of marriage, of love, of commitment, and that grounding is not going to be there. And how much she said one thing that really triggered the poem. It instigated this poem, let's say, which was she wishes even at least 10 more years together instead of losing him so soon. And I just thought, like, wow, if she lives to be 90 and he died at 60, if she can just give 10 years of her life to him, they'll have 10 more years together. And I thought that was so special and so sad and so truthful, and so much love, and death is real, and loss is real, and the grief of the realization of that kind of came through in this poem as I, left the north of Thailand, the northeast in Nong Khai, to come back to Bangkok after his death. Yeah, that's kind of how this poem came about.
In this poem and another poem as well, which would have been The Lovers Do Not Need Words, and also the Dark Night of the Soul poem. So I see a lot of the time I feel like your work has an ethereal kind of motifs, where it's a little bit philosophical, it's a little bit metaphysical, where you are addressing, for example, the concept here of it's this earth is still worth, the ground that we walk on is very real and very solid. Let's not worry about transcending it most immediately, right? I think that's a metaphysical, like, kind of area to go into. And then also, like, right, the idea of dissecting a word and how you can express a thing without explicitly saying it. That's another kind of philosophical, metaphysical idea there. So anyways, all that to say, what are you looking at, or what are you looking to when it comes to your influences in your poetry? Is there anything in specific that, like, you're aiming to do, communicate, or express? And what are the inputs that you intend to be reflecting?
I typically write about love and death and the sensuality of how those two things intertwine, the loss and the grief that involves how these two things relate to one another. So whether it's metaphysical or transcendence, it's part of the love story of being a human. And to touch back on what Op says, is the humanity is about losing the connection and reconnecting, and losing it and reconnecting. And I think what I'm trying to communicate overall in most of my poems is very much this journey of losing and finding, whatever that it may be for each person. And for me, it's basically, I'm writing to heal from different levels of complex grief. And in my, very short experience of this life, I've been around the poetry scene for quite some time. I don't know if it's true, but this is my own personal observation, is that no matter what walk of life we come from and what backgrounds we have, our financial status, our race, our culture, I think there is an undertone of hurt that happens in the tapestry of humanity. And this hurt comes from unresolved grief, whether the grief is the loss of freedom, the grief is the loss of any kind of expression that we might think is important. And I think what I write about is it's about love and death, but there's an undertone of the unresolved grief that I am in fact trying to heal myself from.
And lastly, you mentioned the interplay of different cultures. You are someone who has a foot in kind of two cultural universes. And I'm interested to see, especially when we're talking about metaphysics and I guess maybe kind of religious perspectives, how does that, being a daughter of someone who was a Catholic, while also being a daughter of someone who was a Buddhist, how does that inform your writing? Does the interplay of those two points of view seep into what you produce for your poetry?
I think being in the liminal space of two cultures, you kind of get the best of both worlds and also the worst of both worlds. So I think in some aspect, it's not just the religious aspects, right? Like a Catholic and Buddhist. I call myself a spiritual mutt. I kind of believe in everything and call it existence. I believe in existence and what life shows me. There's the Asian culture and American culture. There's the bloodline of, Irish, Italian, Polynesian, Southeast Asian, like interplaying in all the tapestry of my way of storytelling. And it plays out a lot of times quite subliminally, a lot of times intentionally. When the poem involves storytelling, how I lay out the storytelling follows Joseph Campbell's the mythos, right? The human journey, the hero's journey, the heroine's journey. And I think this comes into play much more than culture and religion and growing up in Asia, even though I have a Western father. But at the same time, it's so much as a part of me, I don't even think about it. Like the things that I reference often is very biblical and also quite mindful with the Buddhist tradition as well, from the trainings that I've had.
Right. Well, that about sums it
Does
up.
that answer your question?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Thank you. Thank you both. That pretty much sums it up. And I guess so far, what I'm seeing is sort of kind of pan-humanism coming from both of your work, and also a bit of a longing for release, a longing for different types of release, but in a way of like a freedom kind of, right? Whereas always a very political type of freedom, whereas as Gabby mentioned, she's writing about like kind of freedom from trauma. So I'm interested to see, like, in this city that we all live in, Bangkok, how does this city specifically inform that point of view of that pan-humanism? Is there any inspiration you take from the city itself, the people in it? Yeah, I'll allow you all to respond.
Well, I think that the city itself, it has like a lot of activists nowadays. Like you don't usually see many activists from like the old days when there were young activists, teen activists, when we had like the far right and far left movements when they clashed together. But now we see like more young activists and grassroots movements moving in. And so like I think that's a really progressive movement towards like being more united and being more progressive towards reaching a center goal.
So, to what degree does outside influences that exist here in Bangkok kind of inform that point of view? That again, that dissenting point of view, that you said there isn't much of a tradition here for. Is there any influence that, like, the interplay of just different types of people and different points of view from around the world? Does that have any effect on that longing for personal liberty that a lot of these activists are after?
I think what a lot of the activists want is like the freedom that we see from our professors who have left Thailand because they are now living in exile in places like France or in America. They are politically exiled of their own free will. And so they long for that freedom to be able to speak without having any repercussions towards themselves. I think that's where most of the frustration is.
I think a lot of people in the world doesn't realize that Thailand freedom of speech law here doesn't exist. Oh, well, let me rephrase that. There is no freedom of speech here. And I think the art form, the poetry as an art form, affords a lot more freedom in that it allows meaning to be carried in an artful way. Just like art, there's a lot of freedom in the arts here, political art, even though you cannot say it out loud with your mouth. You can draw it really loud, actually. The artwork here is advanced, and the poetry world also. Even though poetry is a spoken form, right? Like a lot of it's written, a lot of it's spoken. There's something about this art form that allows for more freedom of expression. And I think many people in the world doesn't realize that the only crime a lot of these political exiles are doing is speaking. The same way you would speak at a coffee shop with someone or with your friends on the phone. That is the only crime, is speaking. Just speaking, just saying things. You can either get kidnapped by the state or you can get put to jail, and it's a big problem. So they would rather have their freedom outside of the country.
And so does this lack of freedom of speech, does this affect the way any of you form?
I look at Thailand with really paradoxical eyes. Like there's so much that exists here that's in conflict with one another, you know, like on the one hand, there's freedom, and on the other, there isn't. On the one hand, there's mindfulness, on the other, it's so materialistic and superficial. That paradox informs my writing a lot, even in the way, you know, I write a lot about love and a lot about death, but even in that, there's paradox, and I see it everywhere. You know, you can look at the way all the sky trains are always stationed near a mall because people want to access shopping mall really easily. And right next to it is always a temple, so that people also go and give alms. So there's something beautiful about all of that. You know, growing up in Tonglo, which is quite a famous area, where there used to be lots of bars back in the day. I don't know, Op, if you went to hang out in different bars in that area or not, but there'll be people crawling out of the bars drunken at 5 a.m. back in the day, you know, and the after parties are still on 5 a.m. while monks are out collecting alms, like tattered shirts, and then people praying all in one Bangkok scene for me growing up. And that really imprinted in my brain that that's Bangkok, you know. It's like, yeah, it's a mix of hedonism and also transcendence, I suppose.
Right. So yeah, it seems like in I guess the cultural hodgepodge and also socioeconomic hodgepodge that is the city of Bangkok, there is a lot of dichotomous and paradoxical situations. And in that same way, like, I think the limits on what you can say and what you can express, but as Gabby said, there's also freedom. Like, people come here for like freedom from, I guess, social shackles. And I'm talking about outsiders, right? People come here to release themselves from whatever society they're from. But ironically, there isn't that same freedom for the people
Who's
who
in here?
belong here. So that's interesting. Thank you again. I think that's very insightful, especially that concept of paradox and essentially the fact that, you know, in order to be free, as Ob said, like, some college professors have to leave, right? You can't be free in your home where your family is, where your ancestors are from.
So I have to say, you know, because I grew up with an American dad in Thailand, the effects of the Thai culture that perhaps limit the speech and expression for women doesn't really affect me. It's not something that, of course, on some level it does. You know, I grew up with a single dad who was the king of the house in a way. But at the same time, like, you get awarded for being bold and also just speaking up in my home. And it wasn't so much like, if you're a girl, you need to be quiet and not say anything. So I think if I was fully Thai, that would apply to me now, that it doesn't. But it was because I grew up here, it's internalized and it shows up in other ways, you know. And I make myself small in my work sometimes, or in front of a lot of people, but in terms of my family, we're so authentic with each other that it's not within the family structure. In the school system and at work, maybe it is, where you have to kind of be more conservative and not so authentic.
Well, that was I guess in terms of current events, that's something that's going on here is like, someone, there was a young girl who got in trouble for, you know, speaking against the royal family. And like her school is rejecting hers. They were not letting her enroll, or that they cowed to pressure to let her be in school, but her teachers aren't grading her paperwork, or something to that effect. So yeah, it looks like all the other social institutions kind of are reinforcing that idea that you're talking about being small. Yeah. Again, I think it gives a good glimpse into just navigating, expressing yourself in a place where it's not necessarily looked up upon to like speak your mind.
Hmm.
And well, yeah, it's actually regulated against. But again, thank you both for this insight into your work specifically, but in general, like a glimpse into what Thai spoken word poets are exploring, the ideas they're putting forth and expressing. That's really what the goal of this here is, and you know, we're very blessed here. Like just being based in Bangkok and having a platform for poets, we're really blessed to have many perspectives, and especially those that are kind of willing to go against the grain a bit, and kind of push the envelope. So thank you both.
Thank you, Pablo. Thank you very much.